Hi, Deborah Callahan here. Today, I'd like to start actually by answering a question that I've been getting from people. And that question is, what does my content have to do with grief? From my experience in helping to guide people through grief and despair, the best way forward is for us to, one, make the decision to be here. And from there, step by step, begin to live in just a slightly different way. And in my opinion, we do this best by experiencing things we've never experienced before, learning new things, meeting new people, and opening our minds to all kinds of new ideas. And all of this helps us heal by ultimately developing a new self-awareness. So today I'm going to take a deeper dive into a lesser known type of healing with my friend, Carole Louie. Carole is a gifted soul medium, advanced past life regression therapist, intuitive development coach, and meditation coach. She has studied these modalities for 30 years with renowned teachers such as Thich Nhat Hanh, Dr. Brian Weiss, Carol Bowman, and Sanaya Roman. As an expert in the field of past lives, she's heavily involved in reincarnation research. She's the founder and director of the Center, RVA, which is a Center for Spiritual Growth based in Richmond, Virginia, as well as Spirit, Mind, Body Richmond. Carole is also the author of 5 books, the first being From Ashes to Healing, Mystical Encounters with the Holocaust with Rabbi Yonason Gershom, and the latest being Unstuck in Time, Memoir of a Time Traveler. She's also an award-winning interior designer with over 40 years experience in interior design and feng shui. And like me, is particularly interested in the process of decorating a home to best support one's spiritual growth. So welcome, Carole.
It's wonderful to be here. And just as a side note, I wasn't the author of From Ashes to Healing. I contributed to one of the stories in it.
Nice.
It's an anthology.
So what I find fascinating about you, Carole, is that you were raised by a mother who is a fundamentalist Southern Baptist and a father who's was a Chinese Buddhist. And as you often speak about, your father's Buddhist background really piqued your interest in past lives. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
We actually ran away from my father when I was 9 years old. So I had limited exposure to him, but I reunited with him later in life, and our relationship was precarious. But it was after his death in 1990 that I became very interested in Buddhism. And where I was in Southern Florida, there were not a lot of Buddhists, but I just started studying on my own, and fortunately was guided to some people who practice Buddhism. So I got to learn some things from them, but I also learned things from my father's spirit, because he came to me at his funeral and we began having conversations that we didn't have when he was alive. So that's what started me on this quest. And where I had seen ghosts all of my life, I had been afraid, like so many people. I kept a lid on that until it was my father's ghost. And then I realized how I needed to overcome my fear. And that's what then led to the many conversations I've had with him, that I had no idea you could heal beyond the grave. That was my first aha, to experience healing beyond the grave and resolve some unresolved issues between him. Part of why we ran away from him, when I was very young. And then I got to thinking about, he was Buddhist, although not a good practicing Buddhist, which is why he did things that, were not part of the Buddhist way. And so I got to thinking, what would his next life be? Because Buddhists do believe in reincarnation. And when I thought about that, I realized I didn't know anything about reincarnation either. So I began doing research about that. And it was interesting because at that time, I didn't know many Buddhists in Naples, Florida, where I was living at the time, but Brian Weiss was in Miami and he
Right.
came to Naples. And so my first exposure about reincarnation beliefs was through Brian Weiss, who I eventually trained with. And it was the perfect way for me to get into my reincarnation research. And I've learned that the research that has been done in the West and all over the world now, and also the regression therapy that has evolved out of some of the research and other things, has expanded what I would have gained had I just followed the Buddhist practice of reincarnation. So it was all in divine order.
Interesting. So fascinating. So why do we reincarnate, in your opinion?
Well, that's a wonderful question. And my experience has been that we keep incarnating until we remember who we really are, that we are essences of the divine.
Mm.
And so we need many lives to understand that one thought right there. It gets layered over by trauma and world situations and what have you. And there's a process about forgetting. There's many theories about that, and I have my own.
So why don't we remember our past lives?
Yeah, well, there's this theory that we drink from the well of forgetfulness, but in my experiences, I believe that we have a soul contract
Mm.
about how much we're going to remember in any given lifetime. The idea is for us to, on our own, our free will, to choose to live a life aligned with our soul. That's the biggest part of our soul contract. And when we accomplish that, then it's not really necessary to remember past lives. But there comes a point when, depending on the karma that we have built up over lifetime and lifetime, there'll come a time when, yes, we do need to remember things, and it's quite the healing process. So that's what led me into regression therapy.
So what is the benefit of remembering a past life?
How many people know that they are an essence of the divine? That's our main benefit, is to remember that. And as we remember that, and sometimes it means going through the heavy lifting of remembering things that are not so pleasant. Those are just crust around the divine essence. But as we do that, we then are able to live more fully in this current life. And, that's kind of the tie-in to what your purpose is, without even having to believe in past lives or reincarnation. You came to that conclusion in your own life through your process. But that's really the essence of remembering our past lives as well.
So, I guess the ultimate goal of past life regression therapy would be to remember that we are divine beings.
Right.
But I've read of stories of people healing their physical body by remembering past lives and getting over um, different blocks, challenges they have by remembering a past life. And that was kind of a stretch for my mind, to be able to do that. And have you had that experience with your clients?
With my clients and also my own personal experiences. One of my teachers, Carole Weiss, Brian Weiss's wife, talks about how she used to suffer from migraines until she had a regression that helped her go into that, the cause. The migraine was the effect. All illnesses are effects. And so if we can go into the cause, we can actually stimulate healing. On my own personal experience, my first regression therapist did a thing called regeneration or regenesis healing. So and I was diagnosed in 1997 with mitral valve prolapse. And so I thought I would use, Arthur Cataldo was my first regression therapist. And I thought I would use Arthur's technique to see if I could do something about this mitral valve prolapse. And so I did the technique that he talked about. And in 2007, I needed to go to the doctor for I was having a rapid heartbeat, and which is one of the things that happens with mitral valve prolapse. And because of the prehistory, they had me do an echocardiogram. And in the echocardiogram, it showed no mitral valve prolapse.
Wow.
So in that amount of time, I went from mitral valve prolapse diagnosis to no mitral valve prolapse diagnosis.
Were you intentionally trying to heal that, or was that just a side effect of your regression therapy? Or
No, it was an intention using this regeneration process. You set the intention, you do this process, and then you wait. You know, there's patience, there's persistence, and allowing divine order to happen. And it must have been for my highest good to have the healing. It's not to say that every physical disorder will be healed through these processes. Again, that's part of the soul contract.
so interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about how does it work? How does past life regression therapy work?
Well, a lot of people have a misconception about past life regression therapy because they hear that it is a hypnotic modality, and it is. But I love the way Brian Weiss talks about it, how hypnosis is really focused awareness. So we are hypnotized all the time, but if you can relax and get your awareness to be very, very focused by creating a sacred space of consciousness, then you can allow the communication with your soul to happen. Another thing that people question about hypnosis and regression therapy is it my imagination? And to that I say, imagination is the language of your soul. And so just like if you're learning a new language and you don't understand the nuances of the language, if you don't understand the nuances of your imagination, then how can you begin to interpret, you know, what your soul is trying to say to you? So there's a process about learning how to decipher that language. And then with that comes, you know, say whatever you're imagining, that comes from your soul's purpose, not my purpose as a therapist, but from your soul's purpose. Because as a medium, the thing that I have learned to do is to first connect with my client's soul, which is a little bit different from the way that most past life regression therapists work. But that's the way I was guided to work, and it's a beautiful experience. And so then we look at whatever the soul speaks to the person through their imagination and how that relates to what they're experiencing in this lifetime. Does it help them overcome a challenge? Does it help them understand a karmic connection between people in their life, or, you know, even people in the past of this lifetime? And, you know, keep in mind that every moment before this moment is the past. So sometimes our work is going to the past of this lifetime. For me, in the beginning, it was going to my childhood, which was very traumatic. And this gave me a sacred space to allow those memories to come up, those experiences to come up, and to heal them from a place that was more highly evolved than I was as a child, to be able to handle those things. And then when all of that information comes up, now there's an integration process. And then I love too that sometimes the soul guides to understand these beautiful gifts that we bring into the world. For me, being a designer was innate. And where did that come from? And that actually comes full circle, because there's a branch of my family on my Chinese side who were architects and designers.
Oh, interesting.
And from the time I was 11 years old, I knew I wanted to be a designer. So I had at that time tapped into that energy. And as I've remembered more consciously, I've integrated that information also into my lifestyle.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Full disclosure, I just recently had a past life regression session with you, and I still feel like I was making it all up. So even if that's the case, is there a reintegration process happening?
Yes. And this is why I say to you, and I say to all of my clients, please re-listen to the recording that we do for your sessions, because when you're having your session, you're in an altered state. And so by re-listening to that recording and going through your own process, because everybody's process is different, that you integrate that into your body, mind, and spirit in current time. And it is a process. And sometimes it takes a short time, and sometimes it takes a long time. I remember the life that was talked about in From Ashes to Healing, when I remembered her death, which was a violent death. But the moment the spirit left the body, and I saw and heard and felt what she thought, which was tremendous compassion for the person who killed her. That was a cathartic moment right there. It changed my whole attitude about people who harm other people. And also it changed my attitude about compassion. Coming back to the soul contract thing, I chose to remember many lives before I came into this lifetime. I chose to be able to go into those traumatic ones to help those past lives heal. But also in our work, we believe that when we heal ourselves, it has a ripple effect. We call this quantum consciousness. And so it's wonderful to know that. And of course, as a medium, as a seer, I can literally follow the lines of energy to those things that I'm healing, and other people on the world that are also healing it. And so I seem to attract people who are working on things that I've also been working on healing.
That's so fascinating. So with your background, how do you, I'm imagining that you react very differently to the injustice going on in the world right now than most people. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I know sometimes it's difficult to share what I perceive about these challenges that are happening, because most of us want to be in that human state. And when I catch even myself going into the human state of consciousness, then I say, okay, it's time to get centered, get grounded, and to ask my soul. I feel like all of these things that we're being triggered about are opportunities for us to get a greater connection with the soul. And because I've been practicing having the connection with my own soul, that it's easier for me to just drop into that. And the way I learned how to do mediumship and soul connection was that when I do that, then I am able to connect with the all that is, and then from there with all other souls. So to give you a for instance, in 2019, I felt an energy happening. I knew it was a dark energy. I knew it had a huge impact. It just kept getting bigger and bigger as I perceived it. In February of 2020, I knew that that energy that I had been perceiving in 2019 was the COVID virus.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I do is I drop into connection with my own soul, and then from there speak to the soul of the virus. Now that may seem really, really odd to many people, but everything has consciousness. Everything is consciousness. And if that's the case, then even COVID is consciousness. And what I saw was that all of the fears of humanity have manifested this being that we call COVID. And look at what has happened. The pandemic has made us stop in our tracks for many of us,
Mhm.
has made us rethink our lives, what is of value, has made us rethink about how we look at death, how we look at so many different things. And so from a soul level, this is something that through cause and effect has created this pandemic, but at the same time, it's like the Chinese word for chaos. So we think of chaos as, life shattering, everything going amiss. But in the Chinese word for chaos, there's also opportunity.
Mhm.
And so I look at all of these things as opportunities, even things that tear us down to our core. And, as you know, grief can strip us. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and sometimes that's what we need, unfortunately, to surrender. And in that surrender, now we begin to awaken to the essence of the divine within. I know many people, like I said, you don't have to believe in reincarnation to get to that place, but that's really what it's all about. And that divine essence is about unconditional love. So whether we want to believe in reincarnation or not, most of us believe in love, but how many of us really practice and live consciously from unconditional love? So again, look at the pandemic, look at the war. These are all opportunities for us to practice unconditional love to
Mm.
ourselves and to others, because we can't practice it to others if we don't know it within ourselves.
Well, that's beautiful. And I think that's a great note to end on. So if people would like to find out more about you or, receiving a session for you, is this something that you can do over Zoom?
Yes, I do sessions all the time on Zoom, and it's amazing how wonderful it works. In fact, when I started doing Zoom, I said, oh my goodness, this works. And I could feel the really strong sacred connection, because this is very intimate work, and yet even over Zoom, it was very powerful. And then that's when I began doing classes and teaching about mediumship, about intuitive development, and those classes, I know some people say they have Zoom fatigue, and but when I get together with the people in my classes, it's such a beautiful energy that we create. And so yes, I do classes, I do workshops, I do private sessions over Zoom, and I do them in person too at my office at Balance RVA.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Carole. It was such a treat to talk to you today. And I will leave all your information in the show notes.
Thank you so much
So,
for all you're doing to help us awaken and live more fully, to be more conscious, and to experience love.
oh, thank you, Carole. Take care.
Thank you.